And we're back. Kelly Stewart here with Ralph Michaels, talking all things Baltimore Ravens for the 2020 NFL season. Ralph, I know you've been putting in a ton of work on some of these. I'm just going to go through what Vegas thinks the Baltimore Ravens are going to look like. Season win total 11.5. Their Super Bowl odds opened 8.5, now down to 5. Or I'm sorry, 8-1, now down to 5-1. The division odds now minus 225 to win the division over basically either the Browns or the Steelers. No offense to the Bengals. And coach of the year for Harbaugh, 20-1. Now, Harbaugh, we've talked about on our NFL Week 1 preview versus the Browns. Love to hear your thoughts on him winning coach of the year at 20-1.
I don't see any value because when you're 14-2 one year, what are you going to do to win coach of the year? You could go 12-4 and win the Super Bowl, and that's voted on before the playoffs. You're not going to get coach of the year. So the interesting thing is, I did a chart on Wager Talk, which is still a free download if you go to wagertalk.com and go to the Ralph Michaels page, and it has odds for everything to win the division, playoffs, yes, no, coach of the year, and then the MVP. There's some instances where the Cardinals to win the Super Bowl were 30-1, but the coach of the year was 40-1. To me, there's incredible value to bet Kingsbury, because even if Arizona doesn't win and they win 10 games, 11 games, 12 games, he could easily win coach of the year.
It's kind of like Lamar Jackson last year with the Ravens. We knew that he was going to win the award, but they were out to the Titans as 9.5-point favorites almost right out of the gate. So that is a really interesting look there, at least when in terms of either offensive player of the year, coach of the year, whatever it may be.
Yeah, again, there's different perspectives. Sometimes to win the division, sometimes playoffs, yes, no. Let's remember this year there's the extra playoff teams. So, those yes, no's are a little different where you have to look at them more closely. So don't automatically look at one number. The problem is when you come to a Vegas sports book, most of those numbers are all on different sheets and people don't want to look where the value is. Well, that's why we do that sheet. Now update it once a month where you can actually see is there more value to bet the division? Is there more value to bet the AFC? Is there more value to bet the Super Bowl? Or perhaps split it up between them and do coach of the year. So look at value, make sure you shop. We talk about shopping all the time and we talk about shopping lines, but you can also shop different types of bets to make where you can hedge some of your bets or perhaps find better value betting it in a different format.
We talk about that on a lot of different shows, Ralph. You're absolutely right. If you live on the East Coast, there is no reason why you can't be shopping if you live here in Nevada as well. And if you prefer to use one of those books in far, far away land, there's plenty of different value there. So again, make sure that you have multiple outs so that you can get the best of the numbers, as Ralph mentioned, and also find value in some of those bets, as he mentioned with Kingsbury, maybe possibly winning coach of the year, even if the Cardinals only win 10 games. That's something to consider there. Let's get back to the Baltimore Ravens. I mentioned Lamar Jackson, so we'll start with him. Lamar Jackson is an absolute stud. There's no denying that. But it looks like the Tennessee Titans may have gotten his number in that playoff game. Are we going to see some regression here from Lamar Jackson now that we've kind of seen over the years? What happens is these defensive coordinators start to get enough tape and they start to figure out your run game. They start to figure out your pass game. Or is Lamar Jackson going to be like a Patrick Mahomes where he's so video game-esque that it might not happen as quickly as we've seen with quarterbacks in the past?
Kelly, I never would want to call you out, but I am going to call you out. And I am so thankful you asked that question. I didn't even give you that question to ask me. Let me say this. The Tennessee Titans did not stop Baltimore or Lamar Jackson. Baltimore had a 530 to 300-yard edge. 3 turnovers stopped the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore had 530 yards. They had a 230-yard edge. Again, I am so tired of hearing Tennessee shut them down. Yeah, they held them to 12 points, but it was because of the turnovers. So, but you do look back earlier.
But no, Ralph, that's exactly what your point is. And that is why I did ask the question, because if you just watch the game, amongst other things going on during the NFL playoffs, it looked as if the Tennessee Titans absolutely owned that Ravens team. But when you break it down and look at the actual numbers, You nailed it. Tennessee did not beat the Ravens. The Ravens beat themselves.
Now, he did get sacked 4 times, so they did have good pressure on him. And, if you look earlier in the year, Pittsburgh held him to 277 yards. San Francisco held him to 283 yards. Buffalo held him to 257. Well, San Francisco, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh were all very good defenses. So there is a formula, but it wasn't Tennessee. So, with that said, Baltimore's numbers were the best in 5 years. Now, I look at yards per game and I look at points per game diff. Last year, Baltimore was plus 107 yards per game. That was the best number in the NFL the last 5 years. Hindsight, I don't know if I'm going to be talking about this with you. The Dallas Cowboys were plus 104 yards per game last year. That was number 2 in the NFL in the last 5 years. No one talks about the Dallas Cowboys offense. Everyone talks about Baltimore's, but the Dallas Cowboys offense was just as good. Baltimore had the number 3 offense, averaging 6.1 yards per play. The number 11 defense, allowing 5.2. So they were plus 0.9 yards per play. That was number 3. When you look at the offense last year, it's basically the same. You have everybody back. You're missing a wide receiver and a tight end that were pieces. You basically have last year's Baltimore's Ravens offense without Marshall Yanda, who's a big loss. He retired. He really is the main player on the offensive side of the ball. But they go and they add DJ Fluker from Seattle. So you have a veteran starter to replace him. Whatever you saw Baltimore with last year, that's basically the same team lining up this year.
All right. Any other notes on the Baltimore Ravens you want to talk about? I'm going to go ahead and say it's safe to say there's no value on them winning the division. There's no value probably even really at this point betting them to win the Super Bowl unless you think that 5-1 is, for lack of better words, as close as you can get to the L word. I don't know if I fully believe that this Ravens team is Super Bowl bound. So at 5-1, I would rather look towards some other teams. Ralph, your last thoughts on the Baltimore Ravens?
Well, I have Baltimore's defense down a few notches. They look like they're going to have 2 rookies playing linebacker. Patrick Queen was a first-round pick. Malik Harrison was a third-round pick. So that's a lot of pressure to be having 2 young kids in the middle. Obviously, they had Khalil Campbell to help rush. When you have a pass rusher, linebackers get better. So the defense I actually have down a few notches. When I break down their schedule, though, Kelly, they're a favorite in all 16 games.
That makes sense.
I have them as a 1.5 point home favorite against Kansas City. So I actually have the Chiefs a point higher, but Baltimore hosts them this year.
Okay.
I have them as a 1.5 point favorite at Philadelphia. With the offensive line injuries Philly had, that may go up another point. I haven't made an adjustment on that. And I have them a 2-point favorite at Pittsburgh and a 3-point favorite at Cleveland. Baltimore has 5 primetime games this year. They have a home game against Kansas City. If there's very few fans, that's a negative. They play 4 primetime games in 5 weeks, including 3 on the road. They go at New England week 10. Now with Cam Newton, that makes it tougher. They go to division rival Pittsburgh week 12, and they go to Cleveland week 14. So Baltimore eased through the division. They went 5-1 last year, but you have an improved Browns team, you have an improved Steelers team, you have an improved Bengals team. Well, someone's got to win some of those games. I don't think Baltimore wins all 5. I think Baltimore goes 4-2 in their division. But the win total to me is still right at 11.5. Having them favored, the games between the threes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 7 games as a 3.5 point favorite down to 0. And let me tell you this stat. In the NFL since 2015, home favorites of 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3. Give me a percentage that they've won straight up, Kel.
Let's go with 46.
47%. So you have a small home favorite. It hasn't even been a toss-up. It's been a negative.
Those are my favorite dogs to look at, Ralph. You know that. And I've always told people, no, you're not going to get rich betting road dogs in the NFL, but you can definitely find some, especially under a field goal. I think that there's always interesting because you have to look at it from a neutral field perspective, which you and I have spoken about this several times. You can talk about it if you want real quick. About how you're going to adjust if there is no fans. I know we're still 10 weeks out. A lot of things can happen, but I'm pretty much preparing for there to be half capacity stadiums or possibly even less. And that is going to hurt some of these teams with a better home field advantage than others.
It is. You have Kansas City early at home. You have Pittsburgh the first half. They have already talked about they're going to be putting ads on the first 8 or 10 rows of the NFL stadiums. Therefore, the fans aren't sitting close to the players. So they're already making adjustments. But Baltimore's schedule, starting on October 18th, at Philly, home to Pittsburgh. Then they have a bye at Indy, at New England, back-to-back weeks, not tough. Then they have the Tennessee revenge game. And then they have Pittsburgh. So you have New England, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Dallas. It's a tough stretch there that there's going to be losses. And then the other two things I look for regression-wise, they were plus 10 turnovers. It's rare that you're plus double digits back-to-back years. And most importantly, they were plus 5 close wins, net close wins. That means they won all their close games. They didn't lose any close games. The ball just doesn't bounce the same way when you see those type of numbers. So the problem is 14 wins, you can regress 2 wins and still be over your win total. When I work out the schedule, I have Baltimore at 11 wins this year. So I would lean to the under, but it's not enough of a value to actually make a bet on them.
Okay, awesome stuff from Ralph. Again, guys, make sure you head over to the Wager Talk YouTube channel and check out all of our other team previews as well as our Week 1 NFL game previews.